Hi, and welcome to Post-Liturgical Knap, a podcast by Saints George and Alexandra Orthodox Christian Church in Fort Smith, Arkansas, featuring Father Alexis. If you'd like to learn more about our parish specifically, or Orthodox Christianity in general, please check the episode description box for some helpful links. Thanks for listening. Now here is Father Alexis.
In terms of growth in our parishes, one of the things that we've seen is, unlike some projections in some places where people will say, okay, well, Orthodoxy appeals to a certain demographic of people, we've been blessed that Orthodoxy is, thank God, it is something that people realize it's the faith that's open to all of us. We often refer to the church as a hospital of sinners. And so which one of us in need of a hospital wouldn't go to the hospital? As such, in this growth in the church and the life of the church, one of the enormous blessings that we've been given by God is growth in demographics for children. We have a lot of young people coming to our church, young married families, and with that brings a lot of children. And what an enormous blessing that is. But as you can imagine, if your church is going from a small amount of people that are mostly older to a demographic where shift all of a sudden where you have a lot of children, babies and young families, things can get a little bit noisy in the church. They can also be, it could be a little bit of period of adjustment that's needed. But I think it's important for us to understand the depth of that blessing. The faith that we have as Orthodox Christians, it's not a momentary faith. A long time ago, when I was kind of a baby priest, when I was just starting out, I remember one of my spiritual mentors, Father Anthony Carbo, who was a priest in Colorado Springs at Holy Theophany for many years. He's since passed away. It's a memory eternal for dear Father Anthony. But I remember he gave a beautiful homily. I'll be honest, I don't remember the totality of the homily, but he did start the homily with this insight. And of course, if you ever have visited some of our beautiful churches across the country, Holy Theophany is certainly one of those gems. It's a gorgeous church, iconography everywhere, beautiful golden dome, very well planned, and it was a church that Father Anthony intentionally worked to build because he wanted to have an authentic Orthodox church. He wanted that life of Orthodox Christianity and ancient Christianity to really thrive in his area, and he went there with a purpose. So he comes out during the homily. It's a beautiful church. And he's standing there, and he begins his homily by saying, you see this church? Someone built this church for you, and now it's your turn to build this church for someone else. When we think about our children in the church, that's precisely what we think about. We're not just simply present here, but we're a witness to our children of what's important in our life, which is Christ and coming to the services in our own community. And when we come to church, when we make that effort, we're giving that witness to our children. But eventually, our children are going to get older and they're going to become adults. And when that happens, we would hope and pray that we live the kind of life that we've instilled with them, the importance, the value, and how precious this faith is for them. And one of the ways that we do that proactively is not just individually in our families. That's a primary way. Their children learn the faith from their own family experiences. But we also have a responsibility, and indeed a responsibility in our parishes for us to build the church for the children that are to come so that they have that church there. And how do we build that church for them? Well, it's what we do now. And so in this way, I think our children are very precious. The challenges that we face in some of our Orthodox churches, babies are noisy. Babies are very noisy. Children can be rambunctious, and they can be noisy. I recall visiting some Orthodox countries and remember thinking, I've solved the problem of how do we keep our children well behaved in church. And at least from my perspective, it dawned on me, if everybody's packed into the church like sardines, it's hard for anybody to move around. I think that's sometimes our complaints for our older people is that children are unruly, they're running around the church. And, I say that with a little bit of cleverness, that if everybody's packed into the church, that they can't move around. But I also think that there's some truth to that. When I was in Ukraine, when I was in Republic of Georgia, when I was visiting Orthodox countries where there were so many people in the churches for liturgy, and there was really no room to do anything, um, it's true. There's not really a lot of moving around. You can't move around. And yet, I think it also creates that environment of worship, that environment of closeness that sometimes could be missing in our Orthodox churches. When we have our Orthodox churches and they're at half capacity or at a third capacity, then I think that it creates this open space that can be distracting. And if we think about and consider our own liturgy, there's really not a lot of silence or any open space in our liturgy. It's just one continual frenetic kind of service. And that's not by accident. Worship engages all the senses, the whole body, everything that we are. And I think that it gives us some insight as well into our own communities. Our communities also ought to engage the whole person, the whole family. We have so many people that have converted to Orthodoxy and they come to our churches and they're so grateful that they can come to a church where children are not excluded, children are not put somewhere else, but the family comes together. And it's a powerful icon, not just for our own people and our children, but for the world, that, this is a community. We're in it together, whatever our station in life is, whether we're a baby, whether we're a child, whether we're an adult. In fact, it doesn't take long for us to realize that when you're an Orthodox Christian, you're born into an Orthodox family, you receive prayers the very first day of your life from the priest. On the 8th day, you pray the naming prayers of the priest for the child. But on the 40th day, it's the tradition, the child is then brought to the church and baptized and received into the church. And from that moment forward, on the 40th day of a child's life, they become full members of the church, communing members of the church. They would be confessing, but of course, babies have no sin to confess. But when they reach a certain age, they begin confessing. But from the moment that the child is baptized, chrismated, the child begins to receive Holy Communion, are full members of the church. And so we don't exclude our children. And primarily, we can hearken back to the words of the Lord, let the little children come unto me. There's a tendency, I think, sometimes for us to look at children as little adults, and I think that's a mistake. They're not little adults. They're children. They're still learning. They're still being reared in the faith. But our example for them and our patience with them, our love and our kindness with them in church is a model for their future of how they view their faith, how they interact with their faith. If we want our children to grow up and to continue coming to the church, it's not hard. It's formulaic. It's very simplistic. If they have a good experience in church, if they see the value that we have in our faith, if they see the honesty, the sincerity, and if they have that experience of God, even if they struggle in life, they will stay in the church. There have been some studies that have been done talking about this, talking to people in religion and even Orthodox children, those who fell away from the faith and never came back, those that fell away from the faith and did come back, and those that always kind of stayed with the faith even though they faced adversity. And primarily, overwhelmingly, what kept the ones that were in the church or what had them return to the church was that they had that experience of church as that place that was home and that they had an experience with God. And so we play an active role in that life of the child in the church. This is why it's so important that everybody of all ages in the church be aware and participate in that welcoming of our children and that integrating of our children. I have families that come to me over the years and have maybe struggled with this or that. And sometimes I think to myself, well, the natural inclination is for parents to get up and take their children and go out of the church when they get too noisy. And I understand that makes sense. And, I think that's a kind thing that people do. And they want their kids to, behave, and they want their kids to calm down. But I have to tell you, there have been times when I've had maybe older people come and complain to me, oh, these children are noisy, oh, they're doing stuff. And I have maybe once or twice thought to myself, maybe next time when the kids are too loud, instead of the children leaving the church, maybe I'll ask the adults to step outside for a minute and calm down. But I realize that it's a challenge for us as a community with our growth. It's a challenge to integrate anybody, but it's a huge blessing because we have to remember why we're here. Why have our children been given to us in our communities and in our families? They're blessings. They're blessings not only immediately for us, but remember, they provide that legacy of people that are carrying on the faith. Like Father Anthony said, someone built this church for you, and now it's your turn to build that church for someone else. This is the life that our children will live and carry on. And in the model of the saints and the model of the Holy Fathers and Mothers of the Church, they continue that legacy of faith that's been handed down to them. So of course, it's of inestimable value for us to consider our children precious, to provide them the education and the experience of God and the love of God in our parishes that's due and appropriate. And so it's a work that we all do together, not just one of us, but we all work together to do that.